time has come to answer the big question. What have I done to my parting tools? So the short answer to what I've done to my parting tools is that I've reground them to be French Bedans. So what the heck is a Bedan? A Bedan is a spindle turning tool that's used quite common in France, I'm told, and it's been popularized somewhat in the United States by a turner named Jean-François Escalon. And I'm told that they use these in place of skews. Now, what makes a Bedan French? Well, two things. First, a French Bedan will be made out of either square stock or rectangular stock. And if it's made out of rectangular stock, the longer side of the rectangle will be in the vertical component of the tool. And that's to give a narrow tool some more rigidity, so you have a little bit more mass involved. If you can imagine, if this is only 1/8 inch wide, if I use an 1/8 inch by 1/8 inch, that tool is going to vibrate quite a bit. So by making it a little bit taller, you get a little bit more thickness and give it some more stability, rigidity and stability. Now, a French Bedan is opposed to an English Bedan, which is made out of trapezoidal stock. The other difference between an English Bedan and a French Bedan is in the way you use it. The French use their Bedans with the bevel facing up, as opposed to the English Bedan, which is used primarily as a parting tool with the bevel facing down. But with the bevel facing up, the French use it to turn beads and do shoulder and point cuts and all kinds of fun stuff. Now, if I only have a single bevel and the bevel is facing upwards, then how do I get bevel support with this tool? And the answer is that the whole back side of the tool is effectively a bevel as well, and that's where you actually make your bevel contact. And typically on a French Bedan, you'll be rubbing the bevel right on the corners, right on this, right here and right there, right on the corners of the tool, and you tend to cut with the points of the tool as well. So now that I've answered the question, what have I done to my parting tools, I need to answer the question, why? Why have I changed my parting tools into Bedans? And the answer to that question is that Bedans make really good parting tools, plus they can do a whole lot more. And the reason they can do so much more than a parting tool is the way that the fulcrum plays out. Now, if you look at the way the fulcrum plays out on a traditional parting tool, as long as I'm parting, my cutting edge is right over the part of the tool that's making contact with the tool rests, in other words, right over the fulcrum. But if I start to use this tool to, say, make a bead, to try to turn a bead, and I try to turn this tool over, if I go a little bit rolled over, I'm okay. The cutting edge is still on top of still over the fulcrum. But the more I roll this tool over, the further away the cutting edge gets from the fulcrum, and the force of the work meeting the cutting edge is going to try to push this tool over, and that's where you get your rotational catch. A Bedan, on the other hand, because the cutting edge is so low in the tool, no matter how far I roll this tool over, my cutting edge is still right over my fulcrum. So that allows me to roll this tool right over, so I can turn beads with this, I can do point cuts with this, a whole lot more than just parting. Now, the trade-off when using a Bedan tool is that it takes some getting used to. Now, if you remember with a gouge, since all the bevel is on one side, on one surface on a gouge, so basically if this is a 40-degree bevel, it makes a 40-degree angle with the length of my tool, and that rides fairly low on the work. And then with a skew, since I had an included angle, that means this bevel on the one side is only 20 degrees off from the length of the tool, and that's going to ride on the work a little bit higher. With a Bedan, since we're using bevel support on the back of the tool, we essentially have a 0-degree offset from the length of the tool on the bevel that we're using for support, and that means the tool is going to ride even higher than a skew, and that takes a little bit of getting used to. And also, like a skew, a Bedan tool is pretty particular about making sure you maintain bevel support. Just like the skew, if you lose bevel support with a Bedan, you'll necessarily get a catch. You'll get one of those spiral kinds of catches. So with this Bedan style parting tool, I can roll beads. That's a little bit tricky. It takes a while. It takes some practice to be able to roll beads with the Bedan. But using a point cut, very similar to the point cut with a skew, with the long point of a skew, that cut is not too hard to learn how to make. And I find that cut alone, made it worth changing my parting tools into Bedans. Now, as much as I like using Bedans instead of parting tools, this isn't for everybody. Some people simply aren't going to like the way the Bedan handles. And the other thing you want to be aware of is that if you decide to try this out and grind your traditional parting tool into a Bedan, and then later on you decide you don't like it and you change it back to a regular parting tool, you've just lost a good half an inch or more on the life of a tool. And I priced these parting tools recently, and they're not cheap. They're anywhere from $30 to $50. As well, as much as I like using Bedans for certain tasks, I also have to point out that it's not an essential tool, meaning that all of these tasks can be accomplished with other tools. The thing I like about using a Bedan for a lot of these tasks is that I don't have to switch tools frequently. There's a lot of tasks that we have to constantly switch tools back and forth to accomplish, and a lot of those tasks can be done all with just a Bedan. So the one cut that I find really useful when using a Bedan parting tool is point cut, just like the skew, where we were using the long point to cut across end grain. You can also do that with the Bedan. And what's interesting is that it has exactly the same cue. The way you stay out of trouble when making this cut is exactly like when we did the point cut with the skew. If you remember with the point cut with the skew, we always wanted to have at least a tiny bit of gap between the cutting edge and the work. And this point cut with a Bedan is no different. We want to make sure that we always have, when that corner is engaged, we want to make sure we have at least a tiny bit of a gap between the cutting edge and the work. Of course, it's a very small cutting edge, so it's really hard to see, but it's the same cue. So I got the corner in, I've got a little gap. You might not even, it's so small you might not even be able to see it on camera, but you'll be able to see it when you do the work. It's a tiny, tiny gap. And as you can see, Bedans do a fantastic job cutting across end grain. That needs no sanding at all. So one place I find a Bedan style parting tool useful is, well, parting. But it has an advantage. When you just part across a surface, because I'm actually feeling, it usually doesn't leave a very good surface on this face right here. This actually isn't that terrible, but I'd like to do a little bit better. I'd like to have a nice clean surface across there to minimize the amount of sanding I have to do. And so typically what I've done in the past is, if I'm going to, this is the end of the tool, if I go to part this off, I would part in a little bit, get rid of some of this material. I would part in a little bit, and then I would switch to my skew to get my nice clean cut, continue my V cut in here. And so I'd end up switching between tools back and forth quite a bit to complete this task. But if I can roll this over, now that this is a Bedan tool, I can roll this over and use the tool on its side to make that point cut. And that way I don't have to put down one tool. I can just do that, I can do the whole task with one tool without having to switch over and over again. So the idea is part, but leave just a little bit of material left, and then pick up my point cut. And a little tip I always do, when you get to the very end of the parting, instead of trying to go right across, no matter how sharp my tool is, I'm always going to tear out those last bits of fiber. So what I'll do is once I get right down to the end, I'll leave a little bit of a nub. And the idea is that nub is small enough that I can just peel it off by hand. A second place I find a Bedan parting tool handy is when making small beads, especially small beads on a relatively large diameter. And what I'll do is I'll just make, using that point cut, I'm just going to make some little trapezoids. Of course, once again, I could do this with multiple tools. I could make this point cut with a skew and then switch to my parting tool to get these little grooves, these little spaces, valleys in between. But it's a lot nicer to be able to just stick with one tool in the hand for the whole pass. And the way you get these beads to look nice is these valleys. When you look at the valleys, they all have to look like they're part of the same cylinder. From here, since they're such small beads, you can pretty much just sand them right into submission. And last but not least, I find this tool really useful for making captive rings. So I'll start out much like I did with the small beads. Start forming my bead. Maybe a little bit bigger. Now in order to separate this from the rest of the work, what I'm going to do is, and I remember because it's a Bedan, I got to start fairly high. And so I want to establish the bottom of my ring first. I know what's interesting is if you eyeball just right down the center of this, you can actually see both grooves on both sides. That way you can get the ring even. And now to separate it, first give myself a little bit more clearance, is I'm going to stick the corner of the tool in at an angle, and I'm just going to make a parting cut. tell it's almost there by that squealing sound. There it is. And since I'm at it, I might as well show how to finish these up. You see the inside of the ring is still a little bit rough, and so some double-sided turner's tape. And now I've turned my workpiece into a temporary disc sander. Now when I first started making captive rings, I used to try to make them completely donut shaped, because I thought that was the right way to do them. But the more I started making them, first of all, it's really hard to get that perfect donut shape. And then very often when I was making these, I was making wedding goblets. That is, a goblet with 2 rings on it. And if you look at a ring somebody wears, on your finger, they're not donut shaped. They're actually rather flat on the inside of the ring. And so I started making my captive rings sort of flat on the inside. It's also much easier to do because all you got to do is keep sanding that flat on there and I'm done. There we go, captive ring. I could spend a little bit more time make it look prettier, but I'll give it a little spritz to see what it would look like when it's finished. There it is. You can see that Bedan parting tool made pretty quick work out of doing a captive ring. All right, a couple tips. Just like my skew, I find Bedans benefit from being really, really sharp. So I hone them. I hone both on the bevel side, and I turn over and I also lap the back. And just like with the skew, if I'm using the point, I would hone the actual point itself. I do the same with the Bedan parting tool or any Bedan, and it's very easy. You just lie it on its side and you hone that very corner. Since you're cutting on the corners all the time with the Bedan, that actually helps out. And you only need just like the skew, you only need the very, very tip to be shiny. The other thing you can do, let's say you've turned your regular parting tool, your traditional parting tool into a Bedan, and you really like the kind of tasks you can do with it, but you just can't get used to the way the Bedan handles. Some people just have a hard time getting used to it. Instead of returning it to a regular parting tool, what you might want to try first is just putting a small bevel right on the end of the tool like this. I've made such a tool right here, and you can see the very tip of the tool looks very much like a traditional parting tool, but the cutting edge is still very low on the tool, so when you roll this tool over, the cutting edge is still over the fulcrum. So if you can't get the Bedan to work, try this one out and see if you can get that to work before you go ahead and grind away the rest of this material to restore it to a traditional parting tool. And so ends the mystery behind my strange looking parting tools. And so if you try this out, I'd be really curious to know how it works out for you. Is a Bedan parting tool just too unruly of a tool for most turners? Or is this kind of parting tool the best thing since sliced bread? So until next time, make sure you turn safe, and thanks for watching.